Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. Welcome. My name's Lorne. I'm the host of the Halcyon Show. Sorry for taking what is effectively amounted to a 3-day break. It is going to be much longer. It seems like there's not really any need for coverage within UK battle rap at the moment because we're shifting into a phase of only worrying about the US. So I'm probably going to be out until maybe mid-October, back end of October. If you're wondering about the hair, long story short, whenever I make a concerted effort to lose weight, the hair goes. Don't ask me why. It's just one of those things where it's just like, if I lose the hair, it makes it easy for me to focus on other things because I have one less distraction. So don't ask me. It's just a weird philosophical thing that I do that I guess just helps me stay focused, which I suppose brings me to the reason why I'm talking to you this evening. And I want to apologize if I've interrupted your evening. There's a lot of battle rap stuff going on within the US. There's football transfer deadline days tomorrow or very soon, I think. And there's a myriad of positive things you could be doing with your evening. And likewise, I plan on getting back to that. And this won't be a very long video. I just wanted to kind of make a point and then piss off. Recently, I finished this. It is basically a primer on philosophy. It goes into very menial amounts of detail with regards to some of the most widely known philosophers, some of their basic teachings and some of their trains of thought. Also explores some psychological aspects. I guess. Hi, Charlie. Number one. It's just something I've always done, dude. I guess it's the passage of time as well. As my hair grows, hopefully I lose weight. It catches up, and then there's a thing. Don't ask me why I do it. Beyond, it's just something I've always done, and it gives me some impetus to feel like I'm committed to. Anyway, that's not important. I don't want to talk about it, and I hope you don't mind. I'm going to be ignoring the chat for the most of this video because I don't really want to engage. I want to just air my thoughts for a second and make a point, because the point's for you who's watching this live and who sees it after the fact. So I was reading this book, little book of philosophy, and like I said, it goes into not a lot of detail, but goes into enough detail to hopefully spark the thoughts of what you might want to explore yourself when it comes to exploring philosophy, the thoughts of social paradigms, of the self, of the soul, of the mind, placement in society, how society should be run, what happens when you run a society in certain ways. The one key element of this book that I kept on coming back to was the notion that every philosopher seemingly reached, which is that ignorance or the lack of knowledge leads to unhappiness. There is a certain amount of happiness that comes from understanding and perceiving your world and the situation of your world in a meaningful way. Descartes illustrated this by pondering his very existence. Like, how can I even know I'm alive? And he apparently breached some aspect of philosophy that was thought to be impermeable, which is that there is no certainty in philosophy. There is no guaranteed aspect of life or the world that can be attributed to being 100% certain. And he broke that duct by saying, I think, therefore I am. I forget the Latin, but he phrased it in a Latin terminology. It's one of the most famous philosophical statements that you could ever hope to come across. And it's basically the only interminable thought that there exists in philosophy. Everything else is debatable. Everything else is up for some debate. However, the assessment I would make as a result of this book is that the second near close indeterminable thing is that knowledge and having it is a pathway to positivity and happiness in life. Why the fuck am I talking about this, you might ask? Well, given the recent political discourse that I see on Twitter online, a lot of the posts that have been sharing, and the unbelievable damage that our discourse seems to be doing to each other, the relationships with each other, the advent and implementation of AI into driving more uncertainty into a world that doesn't seem to know what it wants to do, how it wants to do it, how to move forward collectively as a species, basically. I wanted to hop on because one of the things that I keep coming back to is this notion of a lack of knowledge or ignorance being a determining factor in one's unhappiness. Again, to put myself back in this, one of the reasons why I'm putting more of an emphasis on losing my weight is because I am certain that my personal perception affects me deeply when I feel like I am not at my pinnacle. When I feel like I am not delivering what I should be, or embodying the values and philosophies that I should be, it makes me very sad. And sometimes I need to reassert myself from the ground up. I need to start again. The reason I do that is so that I can make sure that the steps I take are always meaningful and positive. Why am I talking about this? When I hear about the reform discussion and I see the discourse that's happening currently within the UK that's mirroring in many, in my mind, disturbing ways with the US discourse, is this idea, this notion that there is someone to blame. Hi there, Michael. How you doing, mate? There is someone to blame. There is someone we ultimately hold attributable to everything that's going wrong, or to various aspects of our society that are going wrong. You know, if only we all did this, yada, yada, yada. And one of the reasons that I find this most disconcerting is because it's ignorant. One of the things that I would assert to most people is that there is seldom a simple problem in life. Your understanding of it is probably very simplistic, but it is not a simple problem. And concordantly, there are no simple solutions to these complicated problems. Things are more nuanced than that. Things are more complicated than that. The other thing I would assert to people is that very seldom is everyone pulling in the right direction. I'll just put it to you that the company you work at, or the family you exist in, or the social group you frequent, when do you all agree on anything? When do you all pull in the same direction? Never. It never happens. And when I see the conversation turning to blaming a group or an ethnicity or a faith, and it happens to a certain degree that it starts to bleed into the physical world, and that's why I think I'm making this video. If it just stayed on social media, it's different, because social media, unfortunately, is a window into the darker recesses of the human psyche. I don't think it necessarily promotes or agitates things that wouldn't have otherwise been illuminated about people. I think it merely it allowed people a forum and a platform to express what they held in their hearts in the first place, and that's why it's disconcerting, because it was always there. And I think, without getting too rambly, what I wanted to try and say to everybody, and I wrestle with this constantly. How can I talk to people that disagree with me? How can I make sure that I'm not being too dispassionate to people and trying to show an understanding, but at the same time retaining my values and beliefs, not affording a platform for people that I believe hold racist, bigoted, sexist, xenophobic beliefs that I believe are founded out of ignorism? How do you wrestle with that? Because these same people are the people that form the basis of your communities. These are your neighbors. These are people who teach your kids. They treat you in hospital. They police you. It's not enough to vilify anybody. We have to learn to coexist with each other in a meaningful way. But that becomes harder and harder when people become more and more entrenched in their belief systems, especially if those belief systems are rooted with someone who offers you simple solutions to seemingly simple problems. You've seen this with Trump. I'll talk about him briefly, because I think he's I don't think it's any stretch of the imagination to say he's one of the most dangerous individuals that's ever existed in modern history, because of his ability to be able to do something that we have never been able to fully do, but he has been able to shirk with an alarming amount of success, which is responsibility. I tweeted this out earlier, and I mean this because it's supposed to be the paradigm. If you're wealthy, if you have a bigger or higher seat at the table than me, that means that you have a higher degree of responsibility than me, because you yield more rewards from the system that we have implemented to prop you up than me. I cannot individually or collectively be responsible for something when it is your decision, or a decision was made with certain priorities in mind that are not representative of me as a person or the people around me as people. Trump has very successfully devised a stratagem that allows him to reap the benefits of anything that he deems to be a success in line with his philosophical and political goals, while shirking responsibility by effectively pointing to the fact that a lot of the things that governed us as social norms for the longest time were not rules. These were nothing that was enshrined in law. These were principles and general guidelines that people had adhered to based on this mutual understanding of a society that, generally speaking, we all need to get along and help each other. He has embodied, not only him, but a generation of politicians, business leaders, community leaders, influencers, famous people, celebrities, and indeed anyone who wants power and wants the trappings and the rewards of power, but does not want to assume any responsibility for whom or what it harms. Now, I'm mirroring V for Vendetta a little bit, because ultimately the people responsible for that are you and me. We watched this discourse play out and allowed it to happen. We sat back passively, we made our jokes and jibes on social media, we commented, we shared, we derided, and it got us nowhere. He ascended to power not once but twice. And then you've seen the same thing happen in the UK to a certain degree with Boris Johnson, albeit not in the same sense. He wasn't voted in, I don't believe. He ascended through the British mechanism of electing a new party leader, and then by default he becomes prime minister. But he was, make no doubt, another corrupt individual who did not by any stretch of the imagination represent the people. And I think what the most successful thing Trump has been able to do over the last sort of 10, 15 years is amalgamate this idea that countries are supposed to be run like businesses. The thing that he seems to admit from this is what he really means is that countries should be run like conglomerations. If a country was run like a business, in the traditional sense of the word, in the sense of a business was community-based, then I might have more in common with that worldview, because businesses back in the day were held accountable by how much contribution they made to the local communities. Factory workers, office workers, whomever was the employee of a business lived locally. The communities were based around the businesses that ended up funding the economies that they ran from. And so you saw business leaders being held to a certain account, because not only were they important political figures in their own right, but the people who relied upon them for their livelihoods were there en masse. So yes, there's a paradigm of power where the person in charge is the person giving the orders and the person that effectively hoards most of the wealth, granted. But there is always the option of people being able to hold them to the account. You saw that in various ways during the 19th and 20th centuries. What we have lost in the last 10 to 15 years, specifically in my timeline since I became... since I started work, and you've seen the uptick in social media and the the politicalization or politicization or whatever the word is. Sorry, I'm feigning on the word of our social values. It's been conflated with our need to better our own individual lifestyles, and what you've seen as a result is more and more political leaders capitalizing on this sense of individualism, this need for everyone to go and get the bag, to always look the other way so long as there is a personal benefit involved. And again, that's on us. That's on us as people who buy into a more capitalistic version of the world, whereby the person who is the wealthiest must be right because they're wealthy. It's a token of the economy's favor that you are doing something inherently right. And it's no surprise that Protestantism, a lot of that, I believe, in the 19th century, one of the aspects of wealth and success was the attribute, religious attribute of God's favor. Effectively, you see this with televangelism in America right now. They point to their wealth and opulence as a sign of God's favor rather than of of them being con men. I'll just put it bluntly. And so what you've seen is this schism between two classes of people now. I don't believe there is such a thing as a middle class anymore. I think the notion of it is fanciful at best, but I'm happy to hear counter arguments to that point at some stage in the future. But from my view, there are two people. There are people in control, and there are people that are not. There are people that might derive benefits from the people that are in control, be it managerial positions, people that occupy that sort of middle ground, but these are not people that wield any meaningful political power or socio-economical power anymore. They are, at best, hostages of their situation, because what you've seen in recent times is that people are more and more dependent on the financial handouts of people that occupy the top positions. So much so that when you've seen recent political discourse be done in what I would humbly suggest is the right way, which is physical activism, actually going outside and saying what you believe and saying it to the people that are actually responsible for a lot of this stuff, you've seen them pilloried, you've seen them arrested, you've seen them disregarded, vilified, and ultimately disregarded by the same people who are being mistreated as a result of a lot of the systems in play at the moment. Add to that the relative ineffective of social media activism now, because with all due respect, and I tweeted this earlier, there is no rich person or powerful person that's on fucking social media that gives a fuck about what you think. I agree with so many of the sentiments that I see on social media at the moment. I agree with a lot of the statements that are made and a lot of the well-wishing and the well-meaning behind a lot of this stuff. But understand that they don't care. Again, to come back to Trump, he has survived scandals that have derailed innumerable politicians and business leaders. Like, we're so far past the looking glass on this. And what's worse is that now we're seeing what I would humbly suggest is one of the final phases of this process, which is now a decentralization of that responsibility, in the sense of collectively we do not hold the right people responsible for the problems that we are facing. I want to turn back to this book for a second, because early Greek philosophers maintained a position of having a class system based on a ruling class and a worker class and a soldier class and things like that. But the idea was, generally speaking, with which to allot resources in order to make sure that the republic ran effectively. The idea being that the ruling classes would be the most highly educated and the most highly funded, because then they would be in the best position to make decisions for the good of the people. The workers would be, again, given dispensations all the way up to soldier class and all the way up to the ruling class. And the theory went that, look, if we have a group of people, philosophers, teachers, senators, all the rest of this sort of stuff, to govern and educate, to educate people who we then elect to rule, then they are going to be the most highly educated, the most morally responsible, and the most philosophically able to be able to make decisions about the future. For a time, it would appear that held some sway, but the problem there is that the individualistic nature of human beings kicks in, because the statement "power corrupts" is true. Power, wealth, fame, adulation, it corrupts everyone. Like, there's not a person walking around the world that can handle that. There's no one. It's addicting. That's, with all due respect, it's why a lot of the wrong questions get asked at the moment. Like, how can a billionaire demand more billion? No, that's not the right question. The right question is, how do we allow that to happen? And again, the way I would suggest, because I am waffling a little bit and I apologize, but the sentiment I wanted to kind of imbue you with in this stream, for anyone that will watch it, I appreciate that this won't be a particularly popular or positive stream, because the other problem I have with a lot of my content is fucking no one shares it, no one sees it beyond who happens to click on in the day. And that's why a lot of what I say is ultimately going to lost in the ether, but I don't think I care anymore. I want to just say it for the record. problems shouldn't roll down. Bullshit shouldn't roll downhill, as the famous expression is. Money goes up, bullshit rolls downhill. I think it's in The Sopranos, and a few other famous television shows have made reference to this fact, and that's fucking bullshit. Problems escalate upwards because the people who are in charge are the ones responsible for making the decisions that either encourage, promote, or enable those problems. And we've arrived at a point in time in our history where I'm not convinced that the people who are in charge aren't the ones who are enabling, enforcing, and allowing the opportunity for those problems to come to light in the first place. And I come back to reform. Because what you are seeing is a radicalization of people who are led to believe that ethnicity, diversity, and immigration are the true enemies of prosperity in the UK. And that is, of course, a ridiculously simplistic, ignorant, and ultimately fruitless way of looking at it, unless you're dealing with people who are just racist and using political discourse as a cover for their racism. In both instances, I would ask both of them, people who are supportive of reform because they genuinely think that their lives are being trampled on and ruined by people of different ethnicities, creeds, colours, faiths, religions, countries, whatever, coming to this country for nefarious purposes, and indeed racists who for some reason hold the ignorant belief that where you're born denotes your value as a human being. One question, which is, what's the end game? If the end game is that you want your life to be better, how do you envisage this working out? Really? Because I don't think you really have. I think what you've done is you have envisaged an idealistic version of the world that you would like to attribute to that decision without having the knowledge of history or the knowledge of basic philosophy on your side, which is that unfortunately it's not true. And that's a hard thing to reconcile. To know that you have supported and lent a voice to something that is so irresponsibly damaging to so many different people, and that you are enabling something worse than just individual trampling of rights, freedoms, liberties, and things of that nature. You are enabling that class the ability to be able to continue doing what they've been doing very successfully for going on 15, 20 years now, which is continuing to widen that divide between you watching this right now, because I will wager that you have more in common with me than you have in common with someone like Nigel Farage or Trump or insert political name. There's no one in any of that bracket that you share an iota of commonality with. Because if you did, you'd be on the inside of those conversations where more than likely they yuck it up thinking about how stupid people are, that they are so easy to divide and manipulate. I come back to my initial opening embargo with this. Why are people miserable and clutching for simplistic answers to complicated problems? Is because they have a lack of knowledge. There is a limited amount of wisdom out there that is sought and attained in this era. And I, before I recorded this, I did message a few people, as I always do, to say, hey, listen, how do you navigate this? Because I won't lie to you, this period of time terrifies me. It terrifies me in no small way because right, and I'll come back to that comment, Michael, because I wanna again come back to my my point. It terrifies me because while I am aware that this is in all likelihood or at least in guise anyway, a response to what was considered to be an overbearing zealotness from what people describe as leftist interest parties, left-wing politics, wokeism, whatever. And I understand that there was always likely going to be a response to it because people don't like to lose. And if they perceive that they lost or that they are losing, they will retaliate. That's how these things tend to respond. And that's kind of where my concern is. Because, again, my goal in life is not to win necessarily. I think looking at the prism of life as a competitive game or some kind of sport whereby you and I are competing for resources, favor, and ultimately maybe even our livelihoods at one point or another, through the prism of the fact that there are people in this world that will never know a day's work in their lives, that will never know loss, that will never know any kind of meaningful struggle beyond the ones that they implement for themselves out of boredom, I think is evil. I think that's an evil we allow. It's an evil we afford because they dangle this idea of, and when I say they, I mean people like Elon Musk, like Donald Trump, like Bezos, like Bill Gates, anyone significantly wealthy, even down to influencers who masquerade as wealthy, who masquerade as success because they pin this idea of opulence to happiness and fulfillment. And yet, none of them can attest to being happy, and none of them can attest to being fulfilled, because that isn't the path we're meant to take as human beings, generally speaking. There are those among us that are nihilistic, that are sadistic, fucking psychopathic, sociopathic, and everything in between. And unfortunately, those are the people that tend to make their way to the top, because they're the only people that are prepared to do the kinds of shit that it would take to run out other people who are less ruthless than themselves. But that brings me back to my point. Before you do this, or this, or this, or this, when you're looking at who to hold responsible or blame for the problems that you and I face every single day, from the cost of milk, to how safe you feel leaving the house, to how likely you are to buy a house, to how likely you are to make it into middle and late age with a comfortable lifestyle, look that way first. Look at the people who have made the decisions that have enabled this climate to exist. Look at the people who are telling you that they can fix the problems they started. Hold the people responsible who are actively telling you that they have the solutions to complex problems that are so simple, and all they need is your obedient consent to do so. Before you even think about doing that, that is where you need to look first. And anytime something rolls downhill on us, be that an increase in the cost of living, additional charges, limitations to the services and products we're afforded, to our freedom of movement, to our freedom of thought, to our freedom of choice, to our freedoms as generally speaking, look that way. No one crossing here on a boat is ever going to take your freedom away from you. No one coming here and looking for a better life is ever going to be the person that decides to jack up the price of anything you have to pay for, while simultaneously deciding to pay you less for your time and limiting your opportunities by shedding the workforce that is available to us as citizens within an economy, while also shifting wealth in such a way so they do not have to make an active contribution to it. To bring it back, stop looking at people within your community through the lens of they're the ones responsible. Your communities are what you should be supporting right now. Don't lend your voice, efforts, and energy to some asshole that looks at you as a means to an end. Lend your efforts, energy to people who are going to do it for you in return because they function as a part of your community. And let it spread from there. And the next time you're confronted by someone who wants to use the guise of political discourse to masquerade their racism as some valiant patriotic efforts to reclaim a country that they feel that they had at one point, I'm not telling you to engage with it. I'm just saying, ask them the question of following it through to its logical conclusion and identify who is who from that answer. You're never going to get through to an actual racist, people that actually believe that they are better than you, or someone that they identify as being different from them in any meaningful way, because unfortunately, some people are really that stupid. Luckily, they could one day be the minority again. I don't know if they necessarily are or aren't at the moment. I'm not even going to comment or speculate on that, because anecdotally, I can only speak to the fact that most people I interact with do not have any meaningful gripe with people that look like them, or don't look like them, I should say. I don't know what's in people's hearts, though. I can only tell you what's in mine, which is, in the community I live in, the thing that worries me the most isn't where people come from or what faith they hold. It's, are they actively contributing to the world in a meaningful and positive way? And that can just be as simple as going outside and saying good morning to your neighbours, man. Looking after people by knocking on the door and saying, hey, do you need, the elderly neighbours, making way for children and mothers while they're walking the street, being polite to people, just generally speaking. Just menial, tiny little things that can contribute to a wider whole. And I guess I'm sick of people taking the lazy option and just pointing a finger and saying, yeah, it's all their fault because reasons. We, meanwhile, being completely ignorant to the machinations of what is political power these days, which is effectively to disenfranchise the whole. To say everyone, chase your collective tails, rather than every single one of the however many million people in this country going, right, everyone in Westminster, you're all accountable. Conservative, Labour, Liberal Democrat, Reform, all of you. You are now collectively responsible. And that's that. And I don't feel like we do that. We spend a lot of our time going after our own in particular biases, interests, our own anecdotal villains. And again, I'm not saying I garnered anything more from this book than just the idea that knowledge is a path to an opportunity to be happier with having more of a grasp on your own world. I just know that listening to the false promises and the platitudes of someone that is actively out to fuck you over in the end is not going to get you anywhere. Because again, and this is why I'm trying to employ some kind of logical bridge to people that I detest, i.e. racist, bigots, xenophobes. If you're watching this, okay, and you've heard everything that I've said and you still think, nah, fuck, insert racial slur, okay, do you really think Farage or anyone else in an opportunistic capitalistic society who sheds people like they are bad habits will have any use for you once they achieve their goals? Or are you just going to be used and shed to the side? Are your efforts not better suited being invested in people around you, communities around you that actively serve your interests, be them whatever, and instead holding that person accountable for their hypocrisies, for their corruption, for their fucking for their manifestos, for their policies, all of these things that have been presented to you in order to curry your favor? Actually fucking look into it. And don't blindly accept this bullshit that keeps being peddled to you. Because the more you do that, the more you enable people with your silent consent to do things in your name that you don't necessarily consent to, even if you consent in the interim period, in the end, when it's you being evicted, when it's you in hospital with no fucking coverage because the NHS has been defunded, when you call the police and no one turns up, when you can't get a job, when you can't find a home, when someone, again, forget you for a second, if one of your fucking family members is involved in some aspect of our society that could have been prohibited if we had all collectively decided that enough, as far as this idea of individualistic security and, oh, well, I'm a landlord with 20 properties, but hey, I'm just using the system. If it wasn't me, it'd be someone else. Right, well, that's someone else, and you decide, actually, everyone should have a fucking house and everyone should have a fucking job because then there's no homeless people, then there's no crime, then there's no drugs, yada, 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 yada. The things that actually concern you, rather than, I'll tell you what, let's pick, name out of the hat, and right, these are the people we're holding responsible this week. Right, let's just all go after them and I'm sure it'll take care of itself. Do you not find that a little bit absurd? And if you don't, okay, fair enough. I'm not here to condemn people for their beliefs necessarily. I'm just saying you don't have a seat at my table when you want to justify the actions that you've taken in the name of someone that wouldn't do the same for you. Again, with Farage in particular, with Trump in particular, these are two individuals who are obnoxiously, flamboyantly, so achingly, obviously corrupt individuals. They would not piss on you if you were on fire, irrespective of where you come from. You are so far beneath their notice, it is almost hilarious. You are closer to livestock than you are as a human being to them in their eyes. And you keep holding them up because there's the promise that maybe you'll be the next fucking Huck Tour girl or fucking Ibiza final boss or some stupid fucking aspect of our society where we venerate certain individuals with lavish wealth and opportunities. Meanwhile, we ignore things like, hey, maybe no one should freeze to death if you're over 60 this winter. Hey, maybe if we're all paying into the NHS, doctors shouldn't earn over a certain amount, but they shouldn't earn under a certain amount because of this reason. We should make sure that there's enough police to adequately patrol and go on our streets because maybe CCTV isn't enough to dissuade people that have access to balaclavas and masks, which is everyone. Maybe a lot of our problems are solved with basic fundamental solutions that trickle upwards rather than vast reforms. I'm ranting a little bit because I just feel like, again, the discussion and discourse I see of people dunking on each other. It'd be the equivalent of you and me having an argument when neither one of us has any fucking political power. What the fuck is this argument going to solve? We both agree something's wrong. That's why we're having the argument. So instead of that, and instead of all the Twitter stuff and the fucking Instagram stuff and the Facebook dunks and the fucking gotcha moments, throw it that way. Escalate it upwards to the people that run the show. Because they're the ones that take the fucking paychecks. They're the ones that have the opportunities and let their mates in. It's so painfully obvious to me, and I don't understand why it's not our side versus your side, or your side versus my side, or our side versus someone else's side. It's citizens and the politicians, CEOs, influential individuals who stand to profit from our collective effort, our collective productivity, our collective creativity, our fucking time and our lifeblood. Stop wasting your time and energies arguing with someone that is effectively looking for the same thing you are, which is a solution and a better way of life. We are all just human beings trying to make our way in this world. That's it. The difference between the majority of people and those fuckers is those fuckers seem to think that they can win. They can outwin the clock, that they can somehow, some way cheat their way out of everything, including their responsibilities, duties, and obligations to their fellow man. Stop empowering them and start holding them responsible. That's going to require sacrifice, but I can promise you that's better in the long run than going after some twat on Twitter for an opinion you don't like, because it won't do anything anyway. Unfortunately, we are at that point. It's going to involve, hey, I'm not going to pay for this. It's not worth it. Hey, we are all going to get together and decide we don't agree with this, and we're going to petition and march if necessary. And it will involve you being more active in your community. It will involve you actually caring about your neighbours, actually caring about your schools, your local police facilities, your local hospital facilities, libraries, sports centres, every local business owners, people that aren't millionaires. These are people whose livelihoods are based out of their businesses. Looking after each other, holding people to account rather than hoping that a fucking police officer is going to march by when most of them are busy with ANPR anyway. I'm sorry to get ranty, but I guess what I'm saying is stop looking at people who are infinitely more wealthy and powerful than you to fix your problems, because it is actively against their interests to do so. And I can't believe I have to say it like this, because no one that's going to get up on a stage at the moment is liable to be the one that's going to fix your problems, because they are part of the same system that enables every single other fucker that goes up on stage at the moment. And you have to be smarter than that. You have to be better than that. You have to stop biting on a narrative that fits your biases. You have to enable yourself to look past a disagreement or a discrepancy in the way you wish to conduct your life versus someone else, and look at, perhaps for once in the last 20 years, a collective good rather than an individualistic boon. Because it ends in one way. If wealth continues to be siphoned upwards, opportunity and power continue to be siphoned upwards, there's no pressure on the lower classes anymore. It will just fucking implode. Because for there to be pressure in the first place, there has to be something for it to press against. And right now, I'm concerned that there will be nothing at some point. There will be no opportunity, no shared wealth, no fucking assets for the common public to, not even common courtesy. I genuinely fear that. And I'm pleading and asking with whoever sees this, whoever has sat through one of my famously long and incoherent rants, be better than what we have been. And fucking look up before you look side to side or down. Don't take an opportunity for someone to hand you to go, well, you've been denigrated and you've been pushed down, so here's a group of people and you can denigrate them and punch them down. Nah, ask the question of why that person's offering you that opportunity in the first place, and maybe look at them and what they stand to gain from it, and question it further from there. You might find more allies than you do enemies that way. And who knows? Maybe at the end of it, you'll find a way to coexist with people that you never thought you could. Even the ones you disagree with. I would recommend that you read this, by the way. It's called The Little Book of Philosophy by Rachel Poulton. It's part of a series of The Little Book ofs. They're introductions into complex topics. I have a bunch of books that I plan on reading as a result of this. Once I'm paid, I plan on buying them. And I'm sorry to get so animated and rant. I get that anger and this sort of thing doesn't help necessarily. It tends anger and emotion tends to disassociate people with what you're trying to say. It's frustration, though. I've tried to talk to people about what can actually be done, what I can actually do to affect change, what steps I might be able to take, and people keep coming back to me with basically nothing. Just be a good person. I don't think that's enough. But more poignantly, I don't want that to be enough. I don't want to just sit back and recede into the recesses of my fucking society while people let bad habits continue. I want people to stand up for the right things and do the right things. And I want them, more importantly, to know that there's someone out there, hopefully, that shares that viewpoint if they hold them, but just lacks the ability to be able to vent it or verbalize it. I know plenty of good people, but a lot of them just feel like this is the way it's going and what can you do? Well, simply put, don't accept it. Stop accepting individual greed and avarice. Stop accepting blatant racism in the guise of comedy. Stop accepting rampant capitalism by holding the people who run the companies that lay off tens of thousands of people in the name of paying dividends to other motherfuckers accountable by withdrawing your business. Saying, well, I don't like the way you run your business, frankly. I'm not going to be a customer of yours. Stop supporting individuals found to be corrupt, thereby tacitly approving their corruption because they serve your individual interests. Because, again, corruption is a selfish endeavor. Because it includes you now doesn't mean it includes you forever. Hold yourself more to account, sure, but hold them to account more first. Ask more of yourself intellectually, philosophically, and morally. Beyond your biases and beyond your initial need to emotionally vent or direct your emotionality to someone or something that is within your sphere. Because that's all this is. Reform want to villainize immigrants, refugees, ethnic minorities because they exist in our culture in a meaningful way now. You can go out and do that if that's your particular choice in this era because it's easy to do. What's harder to do? And Michael has alluded to this earlier. Actually hold the fucking assholes responsible for deciding I'm going to jack up your energy bills. I'm going to turn up your council tax rates. I'm going to be the one that decides you pay £20 more at the till every single time you go to buy food for your children. Find out who run those companies. They're not... that isn't hard. Punishing them, again, isn't necessarily hard. But it requires a collective effort. And that's the hardest part at the moment. Telling people to act against their own individual interests for the collective good so that collectively we can benefit in the end is nearly fucking impossible. But I'd rather ask it of you than just shrug my shoulders and go, well, you guys are all you're all too fucking stupid to see it differently, so I guess we're all heading towards the fucking cliff edge. Let's hold on tight and just hope for the best. I'd like to think more of most people than that. And I would like to think that more people would have the courage of their convictions to actually stand by their actually held philosophies and beliefs of just generally speaking, I want to have a good, happy life. I imagine that's what everyone else wants to do. So let's just do that. And anyone seeming to capitalize on that, they become the minority that we all denigrate. Because for me, they are the only minority worth vilifying. The people that want to capitalize off of you as a person, your life, your time, your energy. There's nothing wrong with making a contribution, but there's everything wrong with making that contribution not only obligatory, but also part of a wider scheme to defraud all of us of a future we deserve. Based on our collective efforts, not the collective efforts of a few people that have made it their business to convince you that's the status quo, and actively avoiding or resisting it is against your interests. It's hard. It's fucking daunting is what it is. It's terrifying at times is what it is. I get it. And to the wider point, I get it. Be the change you want to see. And I'm trying, man. I'm trying to hold people accountable. I'm trying to hold people... I'm trying to be a more of a voice of reason and a calmer voice, but it's so frustrating. I just must be honest with you. It's tiresome watching the same arguments over and over again with people who, again, between them, what the fuck are you going to do anyway? Sharing these tragedies, these injustices, rather than doing something with them. And I'm sorry, man, like, me doing it, or what little I can do by myself, just feels impotent and ultimately rudderless. And why I wanted to hop on and just sort of get this all off my chest for a little bit, because honestly, individually, I don't think any one of us can do anything. I won't share with you who I've been conversing with once, and it was very disheartening and disconcerting to hear him say this. You know, he felt, individually, he has no power to change anything. And I get that. Individually, we will all struggle to make a change. Hence why this is more of an appeal to everyone to just fucking think, man. Just think. It's really all of my content is. I've never asked you to take anything that I've said philosophically on the strength of my charisma. I think if you're basing your opinion on someone, whether or not you like them, again, you're kind of barking up the wrong tree. You need to test their internal logic with yours before you decide whether or not to believe them. So yeah. Anyways, I've ranted for nearly an hour. I don't know how much more I have to say. I suppose if anyone has any questions, you're welcome to put them. I'll just respond to Michael, because Charlie is messaged, but I appreciate the messages, by the way, gentlemen. And again, Michael, I don't know who the right people responsible are. Again, man, it's not hard. You just follow the chain far enough upwards. You hold that person responsible because that's the person that's taking the most amount of money. If they want to take the big paycheck, well, they're the ones that have to assume the responsibility, the hate and the villainy. And everyone all the way up the chain too, by the way. Never accept, again, I worked in a call center for an enforcement agency for a long time. Me saying it's just my job is a cop-out excuse. I couldn't do it anymore. I hit a moral point where I couldn't pick up the phone to someone who was struggling. I think I've told this story before, actually. I did something I probably shouldn't have done at one point. A guy called, and he was desperately in debt. He was really, really struggling. And it was just parking fines, man. I always hated collecting on parking fines because they were the most unbelievably high charged. And he'd been paying like £10 a month because he just had fucking nothing, right? And he called one day and he said, right, I want to make a payment of £400. And I said, right, where'd you get that money from? And he told me that he got it for his birthday. He said his family had chipped in to give him sort of a check or cash of 400 quid, and he needed a break because he'd lost his house, he'd lost his car, he'd lost his missus, he'd lost his job, yada yada yada. And he's like, yeah, I want to make that as a payment. Now, again, if it's just my job to collect debt, I don't question that. I said, right, let me ask you a question. What have you done? It's your birthday, right? And he's, yeah, it's today. I said, have you actually done anything for yourself today? He's like, have you had a win? And he didn't quite understand the question. And I was like, no, I'm not trying to trick you or anything. I just want to know what have you done for you? And he said nothing. So I said, listen, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll take this month's payment from you, and I'll take next month's payment from you. I'll reset your arrangement so the system doesn't acknowledge that you've missed a date even though you've paid in advance, a flaw in the system that was used to trick people into making payments. Because again, most companies are nefarious in some of the schemes that they employ. And you can have a couple of months where you don't have to worry about a phone call with us. He said, why are you doing that? I said, mate, you're a human being and you deserve a win. That's why. Forget the fact that I've got a job to do, because that's a cop-out excuse. What kind of fucking excuse is that? You need a win. So take the win, man. And what struck me wasn't, because he said thank you. I don't want to say he was ungrateful. I don't think he knew what to do with that. He was so used to a system that churned him up and spat him out because he was unable to meet the obligations that someone else had decided for him based on nothing about him other than a general understanding of the system, which is that, oh, you fell into debt. Well, you must be a reprehensible miscreant. You deserve no sympathy or mercy whatsoever, and you'll be punished accordingly. He didn't really know what to do with that. That stuck with me, man. That was hard to kind of sit and listen to, and there are thousands of stories before and since in my career working as an operator. Luckily, towards the back, I said this before as well. Luckily, towards the back of my career there, I was able to just sort of focus on helping people in what little way I could. But again, that's not enough. Me granting leniency to individual cases wasn't enough to change an entire system of business. Nor was it really enough when I started looking at the business from a perspective of how do I convince people who are actively against helping people to help people. I don't know how much I'm allowed to say about this, but I'm going to say when I came back to the company I was working with, I made a point to try and make a pitch to people, which is vulnerability had become quite a big deal because so many people were just on their asses, man. And the likelihood is, by the way, if you ever fall into default with your council tax, that you'll stay in default with your council tax. It's much the same as homelessness. If you ever find yourself homeless, statistically speaking, it's much more difficult for you to shed that status than it is that you will stay homeless for the rest of your life. It's why homelessness is a growing problem, not a shrinking one. But one of the things that I had to start doing was thinking like CEOs. I had to think like, right, if I was only motivated by money, if I didn't give a fuck about human beings and their general existence, how would I get moral aspects through to them? One of the things that I had to explain to people was it was a good idea to refer certain clients back because if they were vulnerable, it made no sense to enforce against them. Why? Well, because enforcement costs money. And if the enforcement costs more than the debt, Well, it's economically unviable. That's the fucking lengths I had to go to in order to try and make a point to people. I had to put it in pounds. We're talking about people that are legitimately contemplating suicide because of their financial situation. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine being in such dire financial straits that you're considering your very existence? And yet it came down to, well, I suppose if you add this and take away this, yeah, I suppose monetarily it's the right thing to do. And we can guise it as a moral issue that we're doing right by our customers. That's just my experience. And I'll wager that every company you've ever worked for has something similar. Some aspect of it that it masquerades as moral when it isn't. It's just a happy coincidence. And yet, we tacitly approve it because we're participants in it. And we just go, it's our job. What are you going to do? Well, you have a choice not to work for them. Well, yeah, but then I don't have a job. Again, not to belabor the point, but if we all had a certain understanding that morally we have an obligation to the people that we're going to call our customers, that we won't work for people that are reprehensible in the same way. And this is the logical conclusion I would ask you to go to. Would you work for a drug dealer? No. Why? Well, because it's illegal and you're selling harmful substances to people that might denigrate and desecrate their lives. Okay. Imagine there were nothing but drug dealers. What then? Are you still going to hold on to your moral principles? Probably not. And we arrive at the world we're in now, which is, I know what I do is not necessarily right, but I have to do it to survive. Because reasons. Now, let me finish that sentence for you. Because people, infinitely more powerful and wealthy than you, put you in that position. And thousands like you, hundreds of thousands like you. And it never occurs to anyone to tell them to go fuck themselves. And I'm not going to end on this because, again, Michael's commenting and there's 4 people watching. So if anyone wants to leave a comment or you want me to deal with any questions you have or elaborate, then please, by all means. I am not planning on this going long, even though it's been an hour. But I will wrap this. I've lost my train of thought. Oh, God. Well, it was going to happen in an hour, I suppose. Being nice is more important than following the rules of the job. Yeah, but like I said, man, that's not always in people's interests. You know? I mean, traffic warden is an extreme example, but, you know, I've always looked at that as being somewhat of a ridiculous notion as a job. Like there's a reason why everyone hates you. It's because you fine people money they don't have. And the people that can afford to pay for parking fines tend to park for wherever the fuck they like anyway. So it feels like it's a tax on the poor. But again, what do I know? I'm struggling to think of where I was, so I apologize for that. I've veered off on a random tangent. But the point I wanted to arrive at, I do remember this, is that power is always and always will rest in the hands of the people. That's why diluting it by infighting and directing our attentions to particular interests rather than focusing our efforts is always going to be the goal of people that want to rule. Because ruling people that are disenfranchised, disorganized, and ultimately at odds with each other is going to be so much easier than trying to appease a collective consciousness. So Charlie leaves a comment. I'm tired of being outvoted by people who don't think beyond the superficial and elites whose outsized influence influence makes the world worse. Again, though, dude, like, not being funny, we tacitly approve that. Influencer culture is what I point to as being evidence of my standpoint, which is that people will go along with something sooner or later if they see a benefit to it. It's why you see people on fucking Instagram and TikTok doing ridiculous things. Why? Because it gets them attention. The attention gets them influence, more power, more money. Instead of us collectively going, this is stupid, right? And everyone agreeing, it becomes the norm. It's become something that is sort of, it's idealized now. again, creating anything of real content these days is not what we aspire to as. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Creating something of content isn't something that you are incentivized to do as a creator anymore. You're incentivized to create something that maximizes engagement. That is not a good or a bad thing. That's us. That's us, though. If it's the problem of if we all, if you ever use that as a solution to your problem, you don't really have a solution. I take that point. But what I keep coming back to is, again, I always look at what unifies people. And again, for the 3 people currently watching, myself, anyone that's tuned into this so far, we're all just trying to make a good life for ourselves. You know, I wrestle with the notion of death a lot more as I get older. Okay? I can't lie and say that there's not the thought that crosses my mind that one day my eyes are going to close and they ain't going to open again, that I'm going to take my last breath, or what do I leave behind when it's all said and done? You know, these thoughts all cross my mind, and when I think of it in that sense, all I am trying to do is to be good while I'm here. That's it. I just want people to be fond of me, generally speaking, while I'm here. I want to be thought of fondly when I'm gone. And I want to have, at very least, made a positive contribution to the lives of at least someone, if not some other people, before I'm, done. Because with all due respect, that's all you can be assuredly confident you can do. Anyone that thinks beyond that, in the sense of I must cultivate as much material wealth as I can, and I don't really care about the consequences or the ramifications on other people that occurs along the way, I think is just objectively evil. If their argument is I didn't consider that, then I would argue that you are either being willfully ignorant or you are stupid, in which case you are not fit to be a leader or someone that we venerate or empower with wealth. And I get that this is just my philosophy. You might feel differently watching this as far as a means to living a happy life. Again, I think we all have that in common. I don't think that's up for dispute. But I think how we achieve and keep happiness is going to vary from person to person, and that's totally understandable. I can just share with you, I've had a lot in my life. I've gone through periods of being very successful. Relatively speaking, I'm not talking a millionaire or anything, but my point is, I was very wealthy as a person. I had a big family, a good job, lots of financial security, and I've had fucking nothing, man. I've had £40 a month to live on. That's for food, heat, fucking fuel, entertain. Like, I had 40 quid a month, and I was trying to fucking live, right? I've had nothing, okay? And when you have nothing, it puts a perspective in your mind of what you actually need in this world, not what you want, because what you want and what you need become the same thing. And through that, guys, it's very difficult for me to sympathize or empathize with anyone that has more than they'll ever need, because I look at that and go, you've got the same thing as people with body dysmorphia or bulimia. You can't be reasoned with anymore. You do not see the problem that you have. That's why I'm saying that it's not a case of appealing to their moral side or to plead with them for some kind of reconciliation or understanding. You have to hold them to account. You have to be gratuitously upfront about your demands and be incredibly strong with the stance that you take as a result of it, because it is the only thing that they will recognize. Anything short of that will be dismissed. Hence my social media comments earlier. There is no CEO, there is no political leader that's ever going to read anything on social media and go, oh my God, what are we doing? Let's change. Let's do something about this. None. None of them. Precisely zero. So what's the point? I'm not calling for revolution, by the way. This isn't my Vive la Revolution. But I am saying, though, that I think the moment for social grandstanding and dissemination of information has passed, because you've seen now that people are just quite willing to adapt and solidify the counter argument, even if it's baseless. Whataboutism is rampant. If you've never heard of whataboutism, I would highly recommend that you look into the I don't know if it's a philosophy or if it's a doctrine, but it's a fascinating utilization of argumentation, where effectively no one can be held accountable. And again, the only thing I would say about that is that, again, if I'm going to hold people to account, I have to hold myself to account, and so do you. And I get that that's also the reason why a lot of people are never, ever going to get on board with any kind of meaningful political reform, because it all involves a degree of personal sacrifice and personal culpability and responsibility. And we live in an age where no one really wants to accept responsibility or culpability for anything. It's, well, if I didn't do it, someone else would. I might as well be the one that takes that. And that's depressing to me, because I do my best not to shirk my responsibilities and duties as a man, as a father, as a citizen, as a brother, as a son, as an employee. All of these things, I have responsibilities and duties of care to people around me, and to shirk them seems cowardly. And yeah, I'm going around the houses a little bit now, and I apologize. Like I say, I'm just trying to make the point that, like I say, don't punch down or around you. If you're going to punch anywhere, punch upwards, man. Send it back. Your manager wants to make something your problem. Make it the manager's problem, who's going to make it his manager's problem, who makes it the director's problem. And all be united in that direction. Same with your local councillors, with the leaders of your emergency services systems. These are all people that live and work in your area and your communities. It has to start from there, I feel like, now, because holding powerful people to account isn't really possible from our level anymore. They're so well insulated from it, and so now well versed to disregarding it. I just know that I can't abide a country that would elect anyone as blatantly corrupt as pretty much any of our political leaders are in this age. And again, I get that there are Americans and people that maybe don't classify themselves as right-wing agents who have beliefs and ideals. I would just say, again, you had someone that was on a bus when he did not think he was being recorded, bragging he would grab women by the pussy. His words, not mine. And he was elected to office twice. That speaks to the level of accountability that people in his position, downwards to maybe just above where you or I'd consider to be powerful, hold themselves. Completely divorced from stuff that you or I would consider to be objectionable, because it's always justifiable. Always. And that will continue to shock me. In the same way that people like Dana White can outwardly beat his wife in public and it can be explained away and he can stay in a position. These are people that are so far beyond the reach of you or I in any meaningful sense that I just don't believe in engaging with them anymore. I'm about denying them the audience now and focusing my efforts and attention on the masses rather than the few powerful people that for a time we were all led to believe were amenable when they are no longer amenable, and probably never were, just maintained an illusion of it. Anyway, sorry, there's a few comments. Charlie, people can't delay gratification, they just want to react, and then these people don't go away. Sorry, I'm just going to read the comment. And then these people don't go away because the clout incentivizes them to continue their behavior. Yeah, that comes back to this. That comes back to this notion and this idea of attention being. We don't build trust in our beliefs anymore. What we do is we build trust in our outward presentation, so people know what they're getting when they click on our faces, and those are two different things. People follow Trump because they know what they're going to get now. They're not surprised by what he says. People follow Nigel Farage because they're not surprised by what he says. They follow him actively because they want to follow what he says. So again, showcasing aspects of what they say as morally outrageous is ineffectual, because they would point to that and go, and what's your point? Michael, maybe he was joking. Would you want someone joking about sexually assaulting your daughter running for political office? That seems like a fairly simple question. Look, dude, again, we're talking about people that will invariably run the world. These are people that could, politicians anyway, these are people that can decide to declare war. That can decide to make you homeless, or to make you an enemy of the state, or to deny you opportunities. Do you really want someone who jokes about sexually assaulting people? Is that a morally upstanding individual? And again, it's not about running it as a business. Politicians and people that are in charge of business have to be morally upstanding individuals because of the power that they wield. That's not up for debate. There isn't. I will deny anyone that wants to make the argument that someone in that position is allowed to have personal frailties or issues outside of their personal life. Right. So now we're dealing with someone that outwardly lies to me as his job. Right. Okay. Fine. I know plenty of people that are morally upstanding people. And again, Charlie. Right. To both of you, because this is why I didn't want to get into the comments. So I'm going to respond to this last one. I'm not as a diss to either one of you. I'm not engaging with it because that's the whataboutism. We're now engaging in, well, what about this? Well, what about this though? Oh, well, someone did this and it's like, right, okay. They are all in that same boat now. All of them abide by the same rule, which is they are able to justify anything that they do as a means to an end. And I'm telling you that there was a time where that wasn't an acceptable response from people that we empowered. Because make no mistake, and I'll say this to your face, we empower them. Power has and always will remain with the people. Without us and our approval, attention, funding, endorsement, no one who's in power stays in power. No one. Where we have failed is we have empowered and enabled the wrong people for far too long, based on a misinterpretation and a misunderstanding of a system that we implemented for our betterment, that now serves the betterment of people that can use that same system to hide. And I'm saying that there has to be a point where it's enough, or, and I'm just going to say this because, again, if you read this, you read philosophers that were part of civilizations that are no longer around because they either imploded or were destroyed by a supposedly superior civilization. So do not misunderstand that our civilization is as frail as any others. If this continues, there is only one outcome, which is our mutually assured destruction, be it through economic means, through military means, whatever it ends up being, because our collective interests have been muddied by individuals who profit off of our collective discourse. And I'm just saying, are you not tired of that? Would you rather stop holding individualistic groups accountable and start holding people that have a vested interest in you being opposed to someone else without power accountable or responsible? Again, I'm not asking you to take my word for it. If you must, not read up on it. I don't want to sound so dismissive as that, but just look into basic philosophical tenets of ruling and governance. And you'll start to see a trend and a thread with the civilizations that succeed and prosper because they invest in their people versus the ones that ultimately die because the people that run it start to actively look after their own interests, even at the expense of their people. And we're in that time now. Make no mistake about it. vilifying disabled people, vilifying people that can't get a job, or the homeless, or people that have mental health issues, or people that have diversity issues, people that move here looking for a better life for whatever reason, versus someone that has more money than you will ever make, that your family will ever make, that generations of your family will ever make. Who do you really think stands more to gain from the decisions that are being made that lead to a worsening of your circumstances versus a bettering of theirs? And just ask yourself the question, is it maybe time for a change of discourse and where it's aimed at? Rather than picking a new target and being stunned when it turns out that militarizing people's political discourse towards that group doesn't work. Stop indulging your biases and your fucking prejudices. I understand the temptation and I understand the emotional satisfaction that can sometimes come from directing your anger at something or someone that seems so attainable, versus aiming at something that seems so nebulous as to think it probably doesn't even exist. I get it. I really do. But I really am concerned about the nature of this discourse now, and the fact that it's now bleeding over from social media into physical nature. We had the riots last year. We're now getting these dumbass protests. We're now getting these fucking weird counter argument things. And I'm just saying, is it not perhaps a more wise investment of all of our times to direct it at the same people that are not at any of those fucking things? You do not catch anyone in those situations going to that situation. And maybe as well, direct your eye to the same people that, with all due respect to Michael and to Charlie, who, again, I'm not trying to categorize you as misrepresenting my arguments or attempted to derail. I'm just saying that both of you have just exhibited traits that do not serve political discourse in the slightest, which is, well, what about that? Could it have been this? Right. Stop giving a pass to people like that. Stop it. Don't do it. The time has long since passed from seeing the other side of the sword from people that wield it against you who has nothing. It's past. It's done. Unless you really don't care. If you don't care and you don't mind where this is going ultimately because you see no end game that adversely affects you, fair enough, man. Fair enough. Again, I can only tell you I called effectively the riots. I was sitting in the other room discussing it with my housemate and one of my best friends. I said sooner or later that's probably going to happen. And it was only based on an understanding, which is that sooner or later people, if they can't intellectually deal with something and they are being bombarded with rhetoric and oppression through intellectual means, they will take things into their own hands physically. And it's only a matter of time with some of this stuff that you start to see more and more of that as it becomes even harder for people to breathe intellectually in this space. And I'm just saying that perhaps it is not left versus right. It isn't fucking pro-immigration versus anti-immigration. It's not pro-abortion versus anti-abortion. It's not any of these fucking subcategories of discussions. It's people in power versus people who are not. The wealthy versus the not wealthy. The people who are the ones making the decisions and hiding behind the consequences as being ramifications caused by someone else. The head of British Gas, the head of British Petroleum, the head of Tesco, the head of Morrison's, the head of fucking any company or conglomerate that you can name that has provided you with less service for more money. And justify it by rising costs that are permeated by, again, people in charge who are more often than not given their marching orders by the same fucking people that are claiming poverty. Be smarter than the system. Stop justifying the system and the political discourse run by people who seek to benefit from it. You or I don't seek to benefit from it, so let's stop going after each other. It doesn't serve a purpose. We can deal with the philosophical ramifications of rampant racism another day when the symptoms that people attribute through their racism are dealt with, and we can just deal with people that at that point have no other avenue to turn to other than them just saying, I'm racist. In which case, that's something we'll deal with at that point. But for now, I'm just saying, man. It's start asking the right questions of the right people and holding the right people accountable. That's all I'm saying. When you say Charlie, you've said yeah, but I'm saying so the Dana White thing, Charlie. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Dana White's missus isn't the head of a fucking multi-billion-dollar company. Again, not being funny, if you heard your boss hit his missus, would you want to work for him? Stop that. That right there. Stop it. I'm frustrated now because again, I'm not making my point clearly. When the state was reform services in America. Yeah, and I'm not saying we go back, dude. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying though that the discourse then and now is different. It has to evolve accordingly, and it isn't. Charlie's comment there, though, system has no interest in fixing it because the masses benefit from the system. Yeah, my point there, though, Charlie, is not necessarily that it's broken. That it's the system doing what it's intended to do. Hadashrooms. Yeah, I appreciate you jumping in, Hadashrooms. Again, this isn't a video that I necessarily, I'm not going to be sharing the shit out of it. And again, I am sorry for getting so frustrated and so animated, and I'm sorry for not being able to make my points more coherently. I just lack the words sometimes to fully articulate how frustrated I am that people don't seem to understand and reconcile with the fact that symptoms are not the problem. If you spend your time just dealing with the symptoms, you'll continue to have them. So why do you keep doing it? It just seems to me like if you're going to continue to complain about a problem while doing the wrong things to sort it, wouldn't it be a better investment of our energies and efforts to actually do it, dealing with it? Michael asks, what can you do about the system? Again, man, I'm not saying riots. I'm not saying protests necessarily. I am saying, though, holding people responsible and accountable, because it's what we used to threaten to do quite a lot. I mean, look, if you want to use the Trump thing as an example, man, you got to vote them out, for one. And at some point, you need to rally to have people that are infinitely white. Because if I asked you to think of an intellectual mind within politics, I don't know if many of you would be able to give me a name. You could think of charismatic individuals, you could think of people that are famous, but in terms of who you would trust in terms of political discourse to give you thoughtful and insightful answers to difficult questions that are probably going to be not what you necessarily want to hear, I don't know if there are many people that you could turn to. The person I most highly regard when it comes to this sort of discourse isn't a UK-based individual. It's actually Luke Thomas. He does a live stream when it comes to MMA, but he often veers into more political avenues within the United States political systems. And I find his discussions quite interesting for a variety of different reasons. But he very... I guess the reason is most politicians want to tell you things are fixable, and that the solutions are attainable, and that they will be easy. They just take time. Luke Thomas's answers often veer into the somewhat banal, but ultimately quite realistic. And I suppose that's what I'm maybe this whole video is futile. And this feeling that I have is very futile, because maybe there isn't a way of reconciling this. Maybe this is the boat, and you can't turn it around, and we're on course. I don't know. I'd like to think we're not. Maybe that's naivety on my part. The person I've been conversing with, this idea of, well, I can't change the world, and none of us really can at this point. I find that harrowing, quite frankly, and you should too. Again, I get that you watching this maybe think I'm being too harsh. Maybe I'm being too maybe too fanciful. When I moved to the area that I was in, I wouldn't say it was a prosperous area, but it's a nice enough area. Decent enough area, decent folk. Someone was murdered right outside of my fucking house 3 weeks ago. And it wasn't to do with any kind of dispute. There's nothing you can pin this on from a moral or political standpoint. The guy was walking home from the shops and some people stabbed him. Now, the reason I highlight that is because, again, 5 years ago in this area, that would have been unthinkable. Now, I won't let anyone that I actually care about walk around my town by themselves anymore. I'm not going to accept that, because it is dangerous unless you physically exert yourself in a situation. Sadly, I've grown quite accustomed to not squaring up, but certainly letting people know, don't fuck with me. I'll put one on you. I don't expect other people in my life to go down that route, because I would like to think that they would believe in a more peaceful existence than that. But unfortunately, I've grown to accept that there is a degree of confrontation that's required in order to maintain what I would consider to be a near peaceful existence in the area that I live. And my point to that is that's counterintuitive to the existence I want to lead, which is peaceful and, generally speaking, positive. And I want to get back to that. When I came here, that's what I had. And I believe that's not a lot to ask. I didn't move here wanting to own a 7-bedroom house. I didn't move here because I wanted 3 holidays a year. I didn't move here because I wanted a 54-plate Mercedes and everything to be Paco Rabanne. I don't lead an existence where materialistically I want and want and want and want. Unfortunately, though, again, the banality of this video is probably illuminated by the fact that there's a lot of people that would watch this and think, but I do want all those things. I consider that to be standard. Yes, exactly. And how many people's lives are you going to trample on to get those things? How many people are you going to ignore the suffering of to afford a lifestyle that ultimately you will be dissatisfied with when you grow accustomed to it? I'll tell you what, I'll leave you on this. I don't know who said this, but I believe it was it's a philosophical statement. Human beings find meaning in others. We are a naturally social species. We depend on each other. We are not meant to be lone creatures. We do not operate by ourselves, and when we do, we tend to develop deficiencies as individuals as a result, because we don't benefit from the collective. When that operates adequately, everything tends to keep itself in check, because the collective good is what is carried throughout the day. And whenever you've looked at structures of society on a greater scale that aim to do that, be it democracy, be it communism, be it any avenue of governance that seeks to try and place the betterment of its people at the forefront, what ultimately undermines it is a class above that system that actively benefits from it while holding itself not accountable to the problems therein, the ruling classes. And to date, human beings have yet to devise a social governance system that actually embodies that collective good in any meaningful and sustained way. It can for a time, but it never lasts. What I'm saying ultimately is that while I feel like our social norms, our social aspirations, our discourse and interchanging of ideas in its current guise is failing, it's not beyond repair, I don't think. And I would just say that as good as it might feel, and I'm sure there are people, again, I look at the fact that we're now venerating some twat with a fucking mushroom haircut and some preposterous amount of fucking adornments as being somewhat, like I said, I weep. I really do, because you then think, like, that guy is going to be given, advertisements and money and stuff. And I walk past people who I've now gotten to know over the last few years because they've been homeless for so long that it just made more sense to sit down next to them one day and get to know their names. In fact, when I heard there'd been a murder outside of my house, what I was scared of was that it was one of them. I hadn't seen one of them in a couple of days. I won't mention his name, but he's okay. He's fine, and I was relieved to see him. But what I was struck by afterwards was this notion that it's not over. Like, my community is suffering. The people in my community are suffering. There is less work. There is less money. There is more of a drug dependency. There is more violence. There is less of a sense of community. And there is fear and ignorance spreading like a rampant disease. And yet, when I think about who I blame, do I blame the people that perpetrated the violence? Do I blame the drug dealers? Do I blame homeless people? Do I blame anyone individually within my community? No. Because unfortunately, we're all in a position where all of us lack guidance. None of us have anyone that we are aspiring to emulate. None of us have anyone that we can trust morally and ethically with our safeguarding and well-being. Because no one really wants to act with that as their interest now, because that's not monetizable. And I'm saying that, again, we all control our own habits. We all control our own influences, and we influence each other. If I demand better from the people that provide my content, that provide my services, provide my governance, and to you, I would hope you do the same, and it spreads like anything else. But I hope more than anything else it isn't just down to that. Because I fear like that in of itself isn't enough in an age where people can be collectively ignorant en masse. And the loudest voices carry the day. I believe my voice isn't loud in this sense. I believe my voice is kind of a menial one in the scheme of things. I just want to live peacefully, and ideally, I would like to earn enough money to be able to pay my bills and provide a life for me and my children that is happy. That's it. I'm not looking at other people enviously of their lifestyles and way of life, because I also am not aware of the lengths that they go to attain them, because what, again, sadly, most people won't tell you in this day and age is the horrors, crimes, and the malpractice and malfeasance that they are responsible for in order to maintain their lifestyles. And I'm saying that I'm starting to see evidence of my indifference to that outside of my fucking window when I leave my house in the morning, and I can't stand it anymore. It's becoming too much to bear to see that disparity between even someone like me, who has objectively nothing in this world. Materialistically, I own nothing. If you raided my house tomorrow and collected all my stuff and auctioned it off, I'd still owe you money. Versus someone who really has nothing. And it used to be rare. It used to be easily ignored. It isn't for me anymore. And pretty soon, and in the same way I called the riots, in a manner of speaking, by saying sooner or later young men of a certain disposition are going to start becoming violent because they will see no other means to that end. Rightly and wrongly, by the way. Sooner or later, this will hit you in a way that becomes much too difficult to ignore. Be it you're losing colleagues at work and asked to take on more responsibilities for less money, that you are going to be vying for limited resources in the stores that you frequent because they refuse to stock enough and let supply and demand carry the day, that you can't leave your house without seeing people in abject poverty and hearing people in abject poverty. And I, for one, can't take that. can't bear it. It's enough. Don't you think? Enough people have had enough nice things for long enough. And pointing to each other and holding each other responsible for our problems isn't a good enough response for me anymore. Looks like Aaron's joined us towards the back end, so I appreciate the comments. I appreciate Michael as well, and Charlie. Again, apologies if I'm hostile. I get this way when I talk to my housemate as well. I get frustrated, not because I don't think you're trying to listen to me. I get frustrated with myself because I'm just not. What's in here is not coming out correctly. You know what I mean? For me, it's so painfully obvious, some of these problems, even if they're complicated, because I've just seen. The problem is, and this is something that I'm saying to you, this is why I'm trying to say to take this on trust. I've seen this enough now that I can talk about it and ramble about it for an hour and 39 minutes. It's happened enough where I could cite numerous examples of what I'm pointing to and then point it to things that have happened in the popular zeitgeist that I can't ignore the link, be it tenuous or otherwise. It's and yeah, when you start to see people start to lend credence to someone like Nigel Farage and reform, you start to see some of the true injustices of the American political system, the genocide in Gaza, the numerous human rights abuses of places like China. It's rampant because they all suffer from the same problem, which is not holding people accountable who are in power, because we are all fearful of our own individual consequences. When the fact is, and this is the way that I'm given to understand militaristically, Western powers hold potential nuclear powers in the Middle East accountable when they get nuclear weapons, is this idea that they have a I forget what the word is, but a survival instinct, a self-preservationist streak. They cherish their own well-being much more than they do anything else, even to the extent that they will gorge themselves on opulence to an obscene degree before ever recognizing that maybe that's not the way to run a fucking country. They fear us more than we will ever fear them. They do a very good job of convincing you to do the opposite. And I say they, I hate when people use they. What I mean is people in government. Labour, Conservatives, Liberal Democrats, the Prime Minister, through to the Cabinet, through to the shadow Cabinet. Heads of state, business owners, business leaders, CFOs, CEOs, directors of boards, faceless individuals that prefer to remain faceless. Those are the people that should be shouldn't be venerated, and they certainly shouldn't be allowed to remain anonymous. And I guess the other reason why I'm saying this is because, again, to their if they're indifferent to a lot of this stuff, then I would humbly point to the fact that in America they've started gunning down CEOs. Do I agree with that? No. I'm not advocating for violence in any meaningful sense of the word, in any sense of the word. As a matter of fact, I believe violence is the last refuge of ignorance. That's when we've really lost our way. If we really can't settle our differences and discrepancies peacefully and using reason and rational thought, and all it ends up being is who's bigger, who's got the bigger club or the most guns, we've all failed. We're all fucked. And again, I just, a lot of this stuff I see turning physical and violent because I feel like, again, a lot of people will feel that that is their last refuge, and I don't want that. Luckily for me, again, I'm big enough and ugly enough to look after myself 9 times out of 10. There's a few people that terrify me as human beings, granted, and you'll catch me running in exactly the opposite direction. But more often than not, if I've got to be the one that goes through the wall for my family, for people around me, to say, hey, listen, I won't let you hurt people. Okay, that's my responsibility as an adult male of good health. But I will consider that a failure on my part if that happens and I have to. I would consider it a failure if anyone ever loses their life as a result of a political disagreement, because again, I just, as a human being, I think our most valuable asset is our ability to utilize logic and reason with each other, and to try and compromise, and to understand that, again, life isn't always about getting what you want. Life is sometimes about making do. So life is sometimes about not healing. It's just about carrying on and getting on with it. And there are people who will refuse to accept that. And again, these are people that I do not want entrusted to power. I do not want someone to come on stage and tell me, I will give you the life back that you've lost, because that is a lie. It is not true. We can never go back to a time that existed. It is physically impossible. And anyone that promises you any different is a liar. And to the certain examples that have been given throughout the course of this stream in terms of people who do things and all the rest of it, again, I'm just asking you, put yourself in the position of someone that would be at a disadvantage as a result of that situation, because that's how you should always consider your political philosophies. Your political philosophy shouldn't be governed by your individual traits. They should be governed by the greatest need of the greatest number of people, because that is the greatest amount of good that can be done, that can be cultivated and then spread to invariably everybody else. If we empower each other with knowledge, wealth, and opportunity, it invariably comes back round. But in our current guise, all of those things are being siphoned upwards and they never return. And that cannot go on forever. And sadly, it's going to be up to, again, common people, if that's the phrase, I don't know what the phrase is, to hold them responsible by whatever means that are at disposal at the moment. And again, sadly, if that can't be affected through fiscal change by denying payment of services to things, to services, businesses that are run by people we detest, be that by political activism, by voting, by protests, by demonstrations, by sustained political pressure, then invariably, sadly, there are a lot of people that will turn violent because they will feel that that is their last refuge. And again, I would sooner see us try and figure out a solution amicably. Whether or not I think that's even possible at this stage is a different discussion altogether. Anyways, I've been fuck me, I've been going for nearly 2 hours. I apologize to absolutely everyone that sees this. I really did intend for this to be a 10-minute, 15-minute video, so I apologize for rambling on. I apologize for going on a myriad of different tangents, and I will fully admit that I've not founded my arguments in any meaningful way, but again, my intention was originally to try and find someone who is intellectually equipped to have this kind of conversation with you. I'll just be honest, I haven't found anyone that's prepared to sit on camera and talk about these issues. It feels like most people, and I'm not calling them cowards, I'm just saying that I find the fact that they're not able to actually say these things and be held to account for them, even if they feel they're right, somewhat disheartening, because it's going to take people being courageous and actually just saying the thing first. It's one thing to post on social media to a group of people that follow and support you naturally. It's another to just fucking put it out there, man. And I get, not again, people who have commented on this video, people that watch this video and either let it pass them by or whatever, they're not necessarily incentivized to do that now. Okay. Where I disagree with my friend is that I do believe individually we all possess the power to change the world. And the greatest injustice you can do for yourself and everybody else is believing otherwise. I have my doubts, I will grant you that, but I refuse to subscribe to a notion where you or I watching this and the hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands millions of people that all, again, just want to live a happy, fulfilled life rather than reaping the benefits and rewards of untold misery to millions and billions of people, can't oust the few that applies to. And if it doesn't apply to you, don't take offense to it. I get you might have subscribed to some of the doctrines, you might have followed people, you might have supported people, but that doesn't mean that you're necessarily culpable. You're responsible to a certain degree for empowering them, that's fine. But part of the reconciliation of our society, if we're ever going to have one in a meaningful way, is forgiving each other for our ignorance, for our fear. And ultimately, I think a lot of the decisions we make at the moment are out of fear, personal fear. And we need to be better than that. Anyways, Michael, Charlie, Aaron, how to streams when you catch up. I appreciate you all tuning in. To anyone else that watches this, again, I apologize for kind of going on such a long tangent, and really only arriving at the same conclusion I made about an hour and a half ago, which is stop looking at each other and start looking upwards for who to hold responsible, and let it go that way. Bullshit isn't meant to roll downhill despite what they might tell you. It's meant to go back up from where the fucking bullshit came from in the first place. And secondly, we need to hold ourselves and them responsible. It's not enough to continue to find people to blame for our problems, as simplistic and as easy as that is. It's time to be more nuanced and more intelligent, and to bring it back to this, to seek knowledge and wisdom, if not through ourselves, in people that we trust to be knowledgeable and wise in things that we are not experienced in. And that's a humbling experience, to admit to another person, I don't know what I'm talking about. I need your guidance. I need your counsel. And you might need to look for it. These are not people that grow on trees, man. And oftentimes these are people that are, like me, so disenfranchised and so disillusioned with the discourse that I see, with people just looking to dunk on other people for clout and for followers and for influence, rather than actually get to a meaningful answer, that they're going to be hard to find. But it's worth it, man. I think so. So that, look, I'm going to resume my hiatus now, because the battle rap thing, I did put out a tweet saying if anyone wanted coverage of the upcoming US versus UK events, to let me know. No one has. So I'm going to assume that no one really cares about my opinion on the US versus UK scene, and that's absolutely fine. Unless the world explodes, I'll be back probably mid-October to late October. Because hence the haircut, I'm focusing on my health. I'm going to be training and eating and sleeping and doing all that good jazz. So I won't be making content. I didn't imagine I would be making content this week. However, I was moved to do so. And thank you for humoring me, I guess. I appreciate the words from Michael and Aaron about, doing this sort of thing. However, I will be the first to recognize I am one of the least qualified people to talk about what to actually aim for with this notion that I'm putting out there. And I would urge you to seek out people who have a much clearer idea of what the outcomes of what I'm suggesting would be, so that I can be educated too, just like you will be. Because I will be seeking, again, I have reading material now to go into as a result of this book, because it makes actually a very useful bit. There's a couple of books it recommends. History of Western Philosophy by Bertrand Russell from 1945, Constellations of Philosophy, Philosophy for Life and Other Dangerous Situations, Philosophy the Basics, all the way through to novels such as Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, Sophie's World, The Outsider, She Came to Stay, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, there's a lot there. I also plan on reading I forget his name, but The Art of War, because I hear that, and The Prince. I plan on reading those books because I believe a lot of people who consider themselves influencers and business titans have read their books. It would be interesting to see what information they're being given and how they utilize it, because I think, again, it's important to understand where people come from before you judge them. and before you cast stones. So anyways, whatever's going on in your world, I know I've been very, very negative over the last 2 hours, but you should, Aaron. You absolutely should. If and when you have the time, you should DM me so I can pick your brain, because I haven't studied philosophy. This isn't. I wouldn't say I studied philosophy reading this book either. It's effectively philosophy for idiots, which is what I am. But it was just interesting being illuminated to the possibility. So yes, Aaron, you absolutely should, and congratulations on doing your PhD in philosophy. I hope you're again, I don't know what you hope to garner from some idiot ranting for 2 hours, because I am an idiot just ranting for 2 hours. But my point to that is that I hope you are okay. I hope a lot of what I've said is ultimately proven to be wrong, and that I am making a fuss over nothing. I hope that ultimately you find happiness and fulfillment in any way that you can. Because, look, make no mistake, man, life is short and there is nothing guaranteed. When they say nothing's guaranteed, the rules and societal norms that you think are unimpeachable are not. It could all end tomorrow. Not your life necessarily, but the things that you call certainties could not be there tomorrow. So don't take any of that shit for granted and contribute, because your contribution will mean more than you realize. And the contribution that you make will also lead to your own fulfillment. At least that's what I try and contribute. And I gotta tell you, when I contribute, I feel better than when I don't. The book, Michael, it's called The Little Book of Philosophy by, you can't read that, Rachel Poulton. It's part of a series called The Little Book of. I have 2 others that I'm reading at the moment. I have The Little Book of Sociology, and I have the Little Book of Psychology that I plan on reading, because, again, both of them are going to be primers to those subjects, and then will allow me to then look at additional reading. This book, for instance, again, has given me some additional reading in the form of novels and introductions and things like that, which I look forward to purchasing, because I want to buy the actual books. I feel like reading a book is better than reading it on digital. I would recommend it, though. It's only about 10 quid off Amazon. So again, rally against the the elites. Go to Amazon. Yeah, I know, the hypocrisy. Or go to your local library and see if that's probably a better suggestion. Local libraries are happy to order whatever book you want. So you could always do that. I've actually subscribed to that notion, and got me and one of my little ones signed up for library cards. So now we're reading every week, which is, it's nice. Feels like an active, again, we all have to make our little contributions in our own way. Anyways, I'm going to wrap it here, folks. I hope you're okay. And I hope a lot of what I've said is ultimately bollocks and bullshit and fear-mongering, and ultimately, comes to nothing. But I hope you're okay. I hope you're keeping well in your own world. I hope everyone in your world is good. And yeah, I'll be back, let's say, mid to late October. So yeah, I appreciate you tuning in if you did. And I'll see you down the road. Like I say, I really believe nothing is done. So for those watching for the political discourse and are not aware of who Quill is a battle rapper who has made it his mission in life in recent times to troll on football fans of all walks of life, be that West Ham fans, United fans, Spurs fans. He is a top-class football hater, and low-key, I adore him, maybe as much as I do for his battle rap content, that on Twitter he's just a fucking menace. Thanks, Quill. United will lose. So there you go. We all take our positives. We all have our things that make us happy. And to Quill, it's watching United get done by Grimsby. Oh, God. Anyways, that'll about do it for me. Yeah. thanks very much, everybody. I appreciate you all for tuning in. Michael, Aaron, Charlie, Hadashrooms, Quill. Yeah, take good care of yourselves, man. Be happy, be lucky, and yeah, I'll catch up with you. I'll catch up with you in a month or so. So yeah, take it steady. Peace.